Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if parenting is just about the tough stuff, or if there is a real joy in raising kids, especially after things get rough? Well, this new study dives right into that. We all know parenting can be super hard. There are so many studies about the challenges, the stress, and the difficult moments. But what about the good stuff? What about those times you and your child just connect, laugh, and have a blast together? And what about those incredibly important moments when you've had a fight or a misunderstanding, and you managed to fix it? And that makes your bond even stronger. Researchers felt like there wasn't a great way to measure this positive side of parenting, so they set out to create a new tool. They called it the Parenting Joy Scale, or PJS for short. This scale isn't just one big question about whether parenting is fun. It breaks it down into two key areas. The first is called mutual fun enjoyment. This is all about those happy times, the shared laughter, the inside jokes, and just enjoying each other's company. The second area is repair reunion. This is about how well parents and kids can bounce back after a disagreement or a tough moment. Can they make up, reconnect, and feel that closeness again? They created 16 specific statements for parents to rate how often they happen with their child. They used a simple scale from never to always to get a clear picture. Now, to see if this scale actually worked, they needed to test it out. They gathered two groups of parents. One group was a clinical sample, meaning these were parents who were seeking help for their child's mental health challenges. The other was a community sample, which was a group of parents from the general population. They wanted to see if the scale worked similarly for both groups, and if parents in the community sample reported more joy than those in the clinical sample, which would make sense. To figure out if their two ideas of fun and repair were really distinct but related, they ran something called confirmatory factor analysis. Think of it like checking if their questions really grouped together the way they expected. They tested a model where everything was just parenting joy, one big idea versus a model where it was split into the two separate ideas. Mutual fun, enjoyment, and repair, reunion. And guess what? The results strongly supported their two-factor idea. The scale really did seem to measure these two distinct but connected aspects of positive parenting. They found that the community sample generally scored higher on both mutual fun enjoyment and repair reunion, which is exactly what you'd expect. They also checked for internal consistency, which is basically a fancy way of saying how reliable are these questions. The numbers like Cronbach's Alpha and McDonald's Omega were very high. This means the questions within each part of the scale were measuring the same thing consistently. This is super important for any psychological scale. One of the coolest parts of this study was checking for measurement in variance across the clinical and community samples. This means they wanted to make sure the scale measured the same thing in both groups. They found that it did. This is a really big deal because it means you can actually compare scores from parents seeking help with scores from parents in the general population using this scale, which is fantastic for research and potentially for clinical screening. But what does this parenting joy actually relate to? This is where the nomological network comes in. It is a big word, but it just means looking at how this new scale connects with other, already established ideas in psychology. They looked at things like attachment insecurity, parental warmth, and even youth mental health symptoms. They found that parents who reported more mutual fun enjoyment and repair reunion also had children who showed less attachment avoidance. This makes sense. If you have a positive connected relationship, your child is probably less likely to avoid seeking comfort or connection. Attachment anxiety was also negatively related, meaning higher parenting joy was linked to lower anxiety about the caregiver's availability. They also found that positive parenting practices, like giving praise and showing warmth, were linked to higher scores on the PJs. And when families generally functioned well, the PJS scores were higher too. This suggests that when things are going well in the family, there is more room for these positive, joyful interactions. Interestingly, in the clinical sample, they saw that higher repair reunion scores were linked to fewer externalizing symptoms in youth, like aggression or conduct problems. This highlights just how important it is for parents and kids to be able to resolve conflict. Mutual fun enjoyment showed a similar trend with externalizing symptoms. The researchers emphasized that the repair reunion part of the scale is particularly unique. While other measures might look at general relationship quality or how often parents are warm, they don't specifically capture this crucial ability to mend things. After a rupture, they argue that in any close relationship, conflict is normal. And what really matters is how well you can repair those ruptures. This scale gives us a way to measure that strength. Now, like all research, this study has some limitations. The biggest one is that it relies only on what the parent reports. It would be great to hear from the kids too, to see if their experience matches their parents. Also, since parents answered all the questions, there is a chance some of the connections they found were a bit inflated just because the same person was answering everything. They also mentioned that one item was missing for a good chunk of the clinical sample, which is something to keep in mind. And finally, these samples were from Canada, so we need to be careful about assuming these findings apply everywhere in the world. So, what is the takeaway? This research gives us a valuable new tool, the Parenting Joy Scale, to measure the positive experiences in parenting. It shows us that there are two key parts, the pure fun and enjoyment, and the powerful connection that comes from successfully repairing ruptures. This scale can help researchers and clinicians understand what makes parent. Child relationships truly thrive, not just by avoiding the bad, but by actively building the good. I think this research is really important because it shifts the focus. For so long, we've looked at parenting through a deficit lens, focusing on problems. This scale reminds us that the joy, the connection, and the ability to heal from conflict are fundamental strengths. Imagine using this scale in therapy to track a family's progress, not just in reducing symptoms, but in increasing their moments of shared joy and their capacity to reconnect after arguments. That is a powerful way to measure positive change. What would be really cool to see next is research using this scale with children and adolescents themselves, so we can get their perspective also. Seeing how the scale changes over the course of different parenting interventions could tell us a lot about what makes those interventions effective. What do you guys think about the idea of repair, reunion being a source of positive connection? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science explained simply, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.